Brandon, I've noticed on your camera, like your focus is a little softer than everybody else's.
Oh no, I'm just that handsome.
That's for his daytime videos.
What's up, Sybil Shepherd?
You smear a little Vaseline on the lens right there to give you that soap opera glow.
I'm trying to charge up my headphones the last possible minute.
Smart.
I only just found them a few minutes ago.
It's that commitment to quality that really makes this such a good program.
I think we're live on Facebook. Who's doing the recap?
There's no recap.
There's no recap.
You can't recap the whole series and the guests we had?
No, that would take like a whole nother week.
Well, we definitely don't want Atkins to do it.
No. Here we go. Recap was there was a number one series. There was number one miniseries. It was 5 parts, and G.I. Joes were introduced and Cobras were introduced, and we had a couple guests, and then now we have a second miniseries.
Nice.
What's it called again?
Revenge of Cobra.
There you go. Recap done.
All right.
I feel like that was oddly reminiscent of my recap there, Robert.
I know. Well, I'm trying to go for the opposite end of that spectrum. So.
Gotcha. I kind of want Robert to come to my house and give me the talk.
I know. I feel bad for my children.
So,
welcome to G.I.JOE Debriefed, right?
You know, I think that should be our next podcast. Robert gives comic creators, kids, the talk. I'll get Jack down here.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I gave my kids the talk way too soon. That was horrible.
Wait, how old? I actually need this guidance. What is the right age for the talk?
I'm not going to say this live on Facebook. Okay. We can talk after this. That was a horrible.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm still waiting for the talk from my father.
All right. So now back to G.I. Joe.
So what year did this come out?
1984. Actually, that's a great question. That gives us a little context. So the last series came out September 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th of 1983. And this one came out almost a year later, September 10th. And then the rest of the series was 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. So it was a 5-day series. You know, you catch one episode per night, which is an awesome way to roll these out. And that's not how we'll be doing this anymore. So do you guys want to talk about our new schedule?
Yeah, of course. So with the first mini-series, we kind of wanted to launch it and just, see if mostly we wanted a way to distract ourselves and to maybe reach out to the Joe community and just provide some content for everybody with everything going on. So, and then, the reality of family life and schedules kind of sets in. That was a fun event, which we loved, being able to do. But, just again, the reality of it is that we're going to shift it down to one night a week. We're going to continue doing this, certainly at least through the next mini-series. We're already working on lining up some more guests to join in with us. This first week, obviously, will just be the 4 of us. But each, tentatively, the next 4 Wednesdays after tonight, we're going to do the next part of the mini-series. So be sure to log in. It'll be every Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern time. And then, if for whatever reason there might be a change in the schedule, we'll be sure to let everybody know. So hopefully everybody's been able to follow us on a combination of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then as the videos are done, Carson, our friendly Fobbit, has been editing these videos for us and posting them on YouTube. You can see the playlist of all 5 plus an episode 0. So all the episodes from last week already posted. So be sure to check out 3D Joe's for the live stream on Facebook. And then they're typically posted on YouTube the next day or pretty shortly after. So that's kind of the plan going forward. We're just right now we're just focused on the next mini-series. And like I said, we're lining up some guests for that. So we're pretty excited.
So join us a week from today, 8:30, and we'll be jumping into episode 2. And we believe we're going to have a fantastic guest for you guys, but don't want to tease it out.
I'm so excited about some of the guests we have talked about. I mean, I'm excited about all the guests we've talked about, but we have some good possibilities that I think are thrilling. I would like to introduce myself. I am Brandon Jerwa, G.I. Joe comic writer, Robert Atkins, Tom Feister, and of course our friendly Fobbit, Carson. So we are getting into the second miniseries, Revenge of Cobra, a personal favorite of mine.
Me too. Lots of toy memories, lots of action figure memories coming back.
Well, I think with this being a year later, there was a whole kind of launch of new figures, right? That had come out in between these 2 miniseries. So this is where we really get introduced to a whole extended cast, and they really make the most of it, especially this first episode.
if you look at these episodes and, knowing that they came out in September, it's sort of like you watch this and it's like, here's what you're getting for Christmas, right?
I'm sure that was the plan.
Yeah, exactly. Good work, marketing team. Okay,
Diabolical.
so I believe this miniseries has a lot of characters in it and a lot of things to call out and a lot of amazing toys to want. So, shall we get into it?
I think tonight, as the show opens, I think we should just call out had it, needed it, just for fun.
New intro.
Had it, had it, had it.
God, I wanted all those dreadnoughts.
Had it. I only had like 1 or 2 dreadnoughts.
So
It's going too fast. There's too many things.
did you guys notice the
yeah.
dreadnoughts had a tricycle
Had it.
there, but the tricycle didn't
Yes.
come out until several years later?
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, the Revenge of Cobra logo is amazing.
Yeah.
I actually had a good amount of the dreadnoughts growing up. I played with those guys a lot.
Did you
me
notice
too.
that they didn't have the ball joint head? Did that bother you? They came out in '85. They were the only ones with the swivel neck, not the ball joint neck. Did you
I don't
did you
think
notice
as a
that's
kid I noticed too much. Yeah.
Okay. Man, when I saw Spirit for the first time, wanted him so bad.
Firefly. We have not talked nearly enough about Firefly.
Well, he wasn't in the last.
No.
He wasn't in the last miniseries, right?
I don't think
That
so.
doesn't matter. I don't
I
care.
don't think so.
I
No,
still
but
think we
he's-
should talk more about Firefly.
Firefly, I think in the cartoon is the one Cobra that actually never makes a mistake, and we can kind of keep track of it.
Oh
He
yeah.
always delivers every single time, and this is serious.
Yeah.
You know, everybody messes up at some point, either because they're trying to like make a power play, or they just flub it up somehow. Firefly.
So wait,
always does the
that's a
job
cameo from Optimus Prime, right?
I always thought it looked like the thunderclap.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I always thought that was a cameo from Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
like the front end of the truck. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So mail order Duke had that American flag patch, but the rest of the Dukes did not. I always feel like we got shortchanged with the carded release of Duke.
Yeah, but that sticker did not stay on well.
It's true. And usually when you find a figure with that sticker on, it's like partially rubbed off. I've got one.
Yeah.
I
the
love
claw.
Cobra Claws. Yes, yeah, right. I love the
Yes.
claw and I love the Skyhawk. I have a
same
huge
here.
love for the water moccasin. We'll see that later. But I love claws. I love Skyhawks. I love the small personal flying machines, I guess. But
Yeah.
even more than the Fang Copter, super big into the claw.
Yeah. Side
I
note
could
for
never
the
really get behind the trouble bubble.
Oh, you're sacrilegious.
I can't either.
I agree
Yeah.
with Tom and
I
Robert
had
on
one,
that
I
one.
think, as a kid.
I agree with
Yeah.
Tom and Robert on that one. The
He seems
claw.
so fragile for an air battle.
Yeah.
Oh look,
Hey,
she's
who's,
a
the,
fragile
got
for
dude,
an air
yeah,
battle.
who's the guy in front of CoverGirl driving the Wolverine?
I missed it. Oh man, can we go back? Because there's actually a mystery about the Wolverine.
Yeah, here, go back for a second.
Guys, mind if I
Because
skip back? All right.
I don't know how
Yep.
Just a little bit further.
There's the Mobat. Wait for the Wolverine.
Yeah, it's coming up. So look at the front Wolverine.
Okay. Wait a second. He's got purple on? I've never seen
Wait,
that
whoa,
guy
whoa,
in my
whoa.
life.
Duke had a goatee. Did you catch
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, he had like glasses and a goatee.
What is going on? Who drew this opening sequence?
Yeah, that appears to be is that a Saw Viper driving the Wolverine? I'm so unclear.
Yeah, if Saw Viper were out by then, it would make sense. It's oddly purple. They didn't do purple
Yeah.
back then.
That was just some rando. He just snuck in.
Where's Duke with the goatee, though?
Right when he jumped out of the Skyhawk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, with the jetpack on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a tactical goatee. He took it off
What?
immediately there.
Yeah.
It was his disguise. He had a goatee
Yeah,
and glasses.
Got it. Did you catch it?
I saw it.
Look at
That is amazing.
And then there's the Saw Viper. So strange.
Yeah, what in the world?
his glasses and a goatee. It's like he put on a disguise.
That's awesome.
Like a dollar store disguise. Jumped out.
I like her little box of javelins.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. And she's like driving with one foot. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Lady J, immediate badass, like
So-
from the word go.
You guys are right.
I
This
liked
came
her.
out. Sorry
I
about
liked
that.
her more on the show than I ever liked the toy.
Yeah.
The Lady J figure was not a great looking figure.
So many good toys. Yeah, I wasn't too keen on her accessories either.
Yeah.
His tanks don't stand a chance against the Wolverine, huh? Doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it just plows through.
Well, yeah, why not use some of those missiles? I mean,
Right. Just run into them.
yeah.
Saving them for later.
All right, so how'd
The
you guys
Stinger.
feel about the Stinger? So it's obviously a
I love it.
repurposing of a previous vehicle, and I think that's the first time
Oh,
we've seen that.
Yeah,
I love
but
the Stinger.
Yeah,
it was so cool looking.
And they added enough new parts to it that it was kind of unique with the missiles on the back
Yeah.
and the doors and the ceiling.
Here he comes. Here he comes. In a cool vehicle, I may add.
Yeah.
Nope.
Although the
Can
trouble
we
bubble in this one looks more like a love seat with a dome on it. I don't know. It's a little weird.
How come they couldn't fly over the flames there?
Well, I think they go around it pretty. I mean, I think it was just like just a quick barrier, but they get around it pretty quick.
Yeah.
I do like scrap iron being used there.
Yeah, we
me
don't
too.
see much of him, do we?
I know. I liked him a lot.
Wait, didn't he just jump out a minute ago?
He
Yeah,
jumped out again.
That was his doppelganger.
Good Lord, his feet are
Okay.
fast.
What happened was he jumped out of one Skyhawk and he was captured by another.
Yeah, there it goes.
Did he
Crimson
take time
Guard.
out of a fight to give a thumbs up?
Yeah. I love
Great,
this.
dude.
So see how
There we go.
Catches him so gently.
the interesting thing on that is the drawing gets scratchier. So I'm wondering if it's like a close-up of a drawing as opposed to how they didn't draw the wide shot of it.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, they might have had to zoom in, or maybe there was like some, like Larry was talking about, there might have been something they needed to fix on the outer edges and couldn't, so they just zoomed in on the shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, maybe.
There's a lot of funky drawing going on. Some weird proportions, and especially with some of the equipment, like the tanks that were on earlier.
Mhm.
Just the perspective on them is pretty off.
Yeah.
They changed scale like crazy in the first miniseries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His tanks would be huge, and then they'd be much smaller.
Oh, that's
they're-
right. I remember that.
Nice little
It
date.
looks like they're on a date.
Yeah. About the
I
same.
always like this scene because it's the same voice actor for both those guys, for Gung Ho and
Oh, that's right.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Chris Latta, I guess.
yeah.
Awesome.
So
I mean,
why
he
is
did.
they celebrating? Two of their guys just got captured.
Because they got
also-
Cobra Commander. It was worth it.
Oh, and Roadblock and his goofy rhymes.
This is like
I'll
a
never be a
miniature,
fan of that.
It's like a miniature whale right here.
Yeah.
Shout out to Blackwater Prison, which I put in the comic, and you know there were people who did not like me making references to the cartoons in the comic, but Blackwater Prison actually played a fairly significant role
Nice.
during my run.
Nice.
I have to say, a second ago was the first time that a vehicle was not moving. Like, since this show started, there has been a
Oh, yeah.
vehicle in motion every second of the show.
Yeah.
Was Zartan sitting there in the trees?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first time anything actually stopped.
It's a nice little way to show his camo, his cloaking.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
See, now, this is where G.I. Joe started to lose me a little bit, was Zartan. The
Really?
whole color changing thing. Yeah. Yeah, I have to say.
It was a bit
as much
too
as
kind of superpower-y or magic.
Yeah.
You know.
that's exactly what lost me. And I still hung on for years after that. And even for me, Serpentor, I know we haven't gotten there yet, but
Yeah.
Serpentor for me was kind of a tough.
Me too.
pill to-
Pseudo based in science. You know, this is.
Taking the
It's like,
DNA of all the best leaders. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the Dreadnoks though, man. I absolutely. That
Yeah.
one comic book cover where they're sawing the Sky Striker's arm, or excuse me, the wing off,
Yeah.
Yeah.
burning it.
John Byrne, that's a classic.
Did Byrne draw that?
Yep, Byrne. That was a Byrne cover.
Wow. No wonder it stood out to me. So what's happening
Yeah.
here with the pulsing of the armor?
I think it was just like if he was like angry or wanted to, you know, it was like tied into his emotion somehow.
So weird.
It was mood
Giant
armor.
mood ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mood
The
armor.
other
Mood
thing that
armor.
bugged me is I thought for a while that the thing on his head was hair.
Oh, did
Like
you?
it doesn't
Yeah.
quite read like,
A hood or
you know, a
whatever.
hood connected to nothing.
Yeah, it's not well drawn. It should have had points.
Yeah, I was always confused.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you're a big hit on Halloween, Zartan, but it'll take
Just tuck
more
it
than
in.
I mean, I get it though. Like it's to keep his skin from getting sun on his neck, but then why does he wear a bare stomach shirt?
Yeah, midriff. Like,
He gets warm. He gets very, very warm.
yeah.
Fun side note, the file names for the Dreadnoks for Ripper, Buzzer, and Torch are Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. They're all, no, this is true. They're all given some variation of Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod as their file names, which is, you know, still not the goofiest thing about them. How do you get that metal on your pants? How does that happen? Like you buy them like that, or do you have to install the metal later?
Right.
I'm guessing that in their wardrobe, there's a lot of bedazzling going on. You know?
Yeah, okay.
It was
sense.
the 80s, let's face it. I mean, all you have to do is look at a Michael Jackson Beat It video. There's probably a lot of crossover there in style.
Yeah. The visual attitude of what is considered like bad or like really like tough guys definitely changed over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Although with Tiger King, that style seems to be coming back. I mean, those guys are all Tiger King. I mean, 100%. It's all right there.
I saw a custom illustrated G.I. Joe package with G.I. Joe Exotic as the logo, and he's riding a tiger into battle with a pistol out front. And my friend Josh's feedback was, "No way, not buying it. He's a Dreadnought. Like he should have had the Dreadnought logo on there." So
have you guys had somebody send you that action figure post mock-up that someone made?
Yeah. The G.I. Joe Exotic.
I think I've had at least 6 different people send me that thing.
Yeah, I was making the rounds today. So,
speaking of tigers, and Carson, you may know this because you're sort of the expert on all things toys. What's with all the animals? Did they try it once and it worked, and they decided to go that way, or was there something else driving that?
I think it was just I think it was Ron Rudat's wild imagination. But if we go back further into, the early G.I. Joes from 66 to 70 were very straight military. But then from 70 to 76, they had a lot of fun with it. The adventure team, they were going on all these kind of wild missions, and there was like tigers and octopus and sharks and stuff like that. So I think it probably was hearkening back to the adventure team days of bringing animals into the party. That said, they were also doing cartoons. I mean, who was the first animal? That's a good trivia question. Does anybody?
Oh, it's got to be Freedom, right?
So 1984, Freedom the Eagle. Okay.
Freedom or Junkyard.
Junkyard was 1984 as well.
Yeah.
Good call.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe it was inspired by the cartoon. I truly don't know. If we have Kirk Bazigian on, I've made the invite out to him. That would be an awesome question to ask him, because there absolutely were things that were inspired, or those decisions were made by the creative force behind the cartoon. So the advertising agency was a huge proponent of the kind of brainstorming that went into the cartoon. For example, Tomax and Zaymot was originally a design for one character, and the advertising agency said, no, let's make these guys twins and reverse the name and reverse the design. So there was definitely like toy design decisions that were influenced by the commercial.
Cool.
And I could see wanting to put animals into the cartoons, for the kind of kid appeal. So let's try to find out more about it.
I'm curious if there was ever again a property that had such a synchronous kind of combination. I mean, nothing that would be like comics, toys, and cartoon like simultaneously influencing each other. I mean, I can't think of anything. I mean, there were definitely like, He-Man had the line, it had maybe some mini comics, and it had the episodes, but I don't think there was ever anything like
The rollout marketing calendar for the cartoon, the toys, and the comic book was so synchronized that you would have the dragonfly on the cover of the comic book one month, and you would see that cartoon on the television, and you would go to Walmart or Rose's or wherever you would go, and you'd see the dragonfly rolling out. Like that's Kirk and company, the marketing team, just diabolical planning.
Brilliant, man.
Down to
So. Well, and I'm sure they also had to plan months ahead, because the comic books had the animated commercials that were coming out in addition to the animated commercials for the toys. If you think about how far in advance those covers had to be drawn in order for them to work into the animation that was coming, like you're talking, a year in advance.
It seems improbable, doesn't it? But I think the one thing that saves it is that the toy life cycle is so long from start of the idea to polishing the design to making the molds to mass producing, you do have that long headway of knowing what toys are coming. So Larry on episode 4 of our last mini series said that the production turnaround time for a show from start to finish was like 9 months. I think that's what he said. So if the toys, life cycle to get to production is a year and the cartoon's 9 months, I did an interview with Larry and he told me that he drew the covers first. The story came later. So they would tell him, okay, now this month you're going to feature the Pogo and the Slam and Outback and whoever, and he would draw that cover and then he would come up with the story. So yeah, I think the comic had the shortest like lifespan, right? It was
it doesn't,
and then cartoon and then comics.
You're maybe 6 months out or something to make sure it gets solicited and printed into stores and everything.
I'll tell a quick story that I've told many times before. But so when I was 11 years old, I got a tour of Marvel Comics, and as soon as we got there, they told us we weren't going to meet any of the artists or writers. So I was immediately disappointed.
Yeah.
So at the end of the tour, my mom said something to the woman who, I guess the receptionist who had taken us around, and told her I was a big fan of G.I. Joe. And she said, "Oh, well, Larry Hama writes G.I. Joe. I think he's in his office." Nice. And Larry was also the editor on the book at the time. So they walked me back to this tiny little room, and every place that you could stick magazines or papers or comics was just packed. I mean, it was just stuffed with books and comics. And he actually shared this tiny little office with another person. So they took me back and introduced me to Larry, and he was nice enough to spend some time with me. And so in the comic book at the time, the big storyline was who killed the Hard Master. Mm-hmm. And Larry told me who the killer was and swore me to secrecy, and I never told anyone.
Oh,
yes. So he told me who the killer was. Spoiler alert, it was Zartan. And so that didn't come out in the comics for at least a year. Wow. It was a long time. So cut to a few years ago, I'm doing a panel with Larry, and he's talking about his writing process. He's like, I just made stuff up as I was going along. Like, I didn't have a plan per se. I was just throwing it out there. So it sounded to me like, and I got maybe a little bit of confirmation that he probably just made that up in the moment when he was talking to me, and then just happened to remember it later when he was actually writing the issue.
He's like, well, I told that Feister guy that it was Zartan, so I guess I better come through on it.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was the first time I met Larry Hama, and awesome. So like I said, swore me to secrecy, and I never told anyone who the killer of the Hard Master was.
Nice.
Awesome. Guys, I'm going to step away for just a second. Please proceed without me. I have to grab a power cord for my laptop.
Okay.
I got some notification. Good. I'll be back.
Real quick, I'm trying to find this picture. I remember seeing this picture of Larry Hama. It was like in the late 70s in his Marvel office. He's like kicked back. He's got long hair at the time. And I can't find it off the top of my head, but I remember I had it like on my phone because I saved it up like, oh, this is hilarious. And then it was like literally a week later, I was at a convention set up next to Larry. I was like, Larry, oh my gosh, you remember this? And he looked at it, he's like, oh, wow, yeah. As he's like talking about it. And he goes, see that case right there under my desk? I was like, yeah. He goes, that's a real Uzi. I was like, what? Like, you had an Uzi under your desk at Marvel offices? He's like, well, you never knew what was going to happen. I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
That's been one of the great joys of G.I. Joe, has been getting to know Larry. And a few years ago, I got to take my son to breakfast with Larry. And like, if you had told, and Jack was the same age that I was when I met him.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool.
And it was surreal.
Yeah, I've been able to finagle my way into meeting with several of these creators, and Larry had me up at his condo in New York, and it's just amazing, man.
Oh, I think I've seen that video. Yeah, you
can see World Trade from there. Like, he's just right in the middle of it. It's absolutely beautiful, and his studios, the apartment itself is very beautiful, but you go up this narrow stairway, staircase really, and then there's this long bookshelf of just all these books, and then you go into this little, it's probably like 10 feet by maybe 10 feet, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. It's even smaller than that. And it's just this like creative space where all this amazing stuff has happened over the last few decades.
That's
pretty awesome.
Yeah. He's great. There's kind of two versions of Larry, and you kind of never know which version you're going to get.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, he'll sit there sometimes at a con. He's got his little aviator glasses, and he's just like sitting back like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you ask a question, he's like, "That's all you get." You're like, "All right, well, thanks for my childhood." And then other times he won't stop talking. Like he's got the best stories, man.
I think that could go for all of us. I mean, we all have those days where I'm not really trying to talk to you.
I pray that someday Larry writes his life story because he has lived 6 lives. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in on some of these questions or comments. So Dino is a very, very knowledgeable comic book and cartoon guy. He said the opening was better than that of the Mask of Ice. I agree. There's just more toys to show. And Lady J firing her Magnum 357 is the only shot where we'll see an actual firearm used on the show. Now, I would beg to differ on that. Well, we watched the movie opening. Actually, I watched it after our show with Larry Houston because we failed to play it, but. When Hawk is up there with the machine gun, there are absolutely shells ejecting from the machine gun. So I would say that's a real gun.
And isn't Duke using – I'm sorry, not Duke, General Hawk, when he shows up later, doesn't he use an actual 45?
Let's keep a lookout for it. They all look like weapons, but I think if you're shooting lasers and not ejecting shells, maybe that's what he's getting at, but we'll see.
Yeah.
He also said the Lady J figure was the first figure based after the cartoon. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. And then the first names of the Dreadnoks, are they Tom, Dick, and Harry? Bill Leach.
Oh, yeah.
They're Tom, Dick, and Harry? All right.
Tom, Dick, and Harry, wink and blink and nod.
Who's the character who the file card originally made some reference to mental illness and they had to change it up?
That was Zartan. So they said his psychological profile, extreme paranoid schizophrenic, I think is how it starts out.
Yep. Gotcha.
And there was a mother's group, for lack of better words, that got together and protested, and Hasbro changed it. I think that there are so many more of those Zartan packages out there with the extreme paranoid schizophrenic, though. So they made the running change, but I think there's a lot less of that changed part of the run than there is the paranoid schizophrenic run.
Gotcha. So. I remember being friends with kids whose moms were like, "Oh no, I won't let my kid play with war toys," and always feeling kind of bad for those kids.
Take pity on them.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, even as a kid, I used to think like, well, I mean, no one's going out and getting anvils and dropping them on people. Like it's entertainment, and but then again, you also talk to, and I don't want to name names, but I've talked to G.I. Joe creators who have a difficult relationship with the more jingoistic side of G.I. Joe, and how it inspired some guys to kind of take the militarism a little too far. And so I think there's some complex feelings about what the influence of G.I. Joe did to kids that grew up with it. Does that make sense?
There is no doubt. There's no doubt. Yeah. So in doing 3D Joes, I've gotten a lot of messages from a lot of people that are diehard fans of this stuff. And there is no doubt it inspired people to go in the military. So
yes,
if there's parents out there, they're like, I don't want my kids going in the military. I could see them not wanting their kids to watch G.I. Joe.
No. It's not that so much as people who miss the point of, this is a coalition of people who all look differently, think differently, and differently, but are stronger together.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then there are guys who, they just completely missed that lesson of what G.I. Joe's about.
It's teamwork, it's sacrifice, it's commitment, it's all those things. It's it's diversity from day one. I think G.I. Joe's awesome.
And working at your highest level.
Yep. So I don't know. Like you said, I feel bad for the kids of those parents,
Yeah.
So, all right, you guys want to get back on it?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Is Josh Shearer a friend?
He is. He's not. He's like trolling.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all jokes. It's all jokes. He's actually like one of my best friends.
I can't tell.
No, he's totally trolling. He's like one of my best friends. He's just an idiot.
Okay.
He's a lovable idiot.
All right.
He's actually like a client too, so don't piss him off.
All right.
You're the one that called him an idiot.
I know. Wait, we're not
I
the
can
ones
call him
saying
an
it.
idiot because
Yeah.
he's my friend.
Okay.
He's not my client, so
Yeah, that's true too.
yeah.
Oh, Storm Shadow, Storm Shadow.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Dude, I wanted
He's
Storm
short
Shadow
compared to
so
Destro.
bad. He is, but that's just because Destro's so damn big, though, right?
Yeah, he's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Were
Like
those
the-
X-23s flying by too?
I think it was Conquest X30. X30.
X-30, yeah.
Yep. That was my Christmas present in 1986. I figured out that Santa Claus wasn't real because I found it a week before Christmas, addressed to Carson from Santa.
But you have to say, like, the Conquest X30 after having a Sky Striker was just a letdown. I mean,
No,
the
it's
Sky
never as
Striker was
cool.
such a masterpiece.
I never had the Sky Striker, so I never had that comparison.
Oh, still? Do you not have one?
No, I do now, and I can see that
Okay.
now. But as a kid, I
Yeah.
never had the Sky Striker, so I thought the X30 was just everything.
Gotcha. Although the Tomahawk was a big improvement over the Dragonfly.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, massive, massive.
But the little lever on the back of the Dragonfly to make it spin is pretty cool, though.
That's pretty nice.
It is pretty good. There's nothing wrong with the Dragonfly. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've now seen Destro with his big MacGuffin. What a big MacGuffin you have, Destro.
It's funny how these miniseries is and the live-action movies, like they always center around a MacGuffin device. Rise of Cobra had the nanites, Retaliation had the rod thing.
Yeah.
So
How's
Zartan is a
how's he not
master.
in handcuffs right now?
Yeah. And why does he still have the helmet on?
Yeah, exactly.
In the
I
comic,
mean, like,
they
that was one
explain
thing.
that.
Yeah. And I
In the
wish that we had
comic.
had that scene in the movie too, or in the animated film.
Yeah.
My single favorite issue of G.I. Joe is actually the one where they capture Cobra Commander and they take him up and they build the G.I. Joe headquarters prefab in the Rocky Mountains. And they explain why they can't just take his helmet off, because it's lined with plastic explosive. I love that Zartan is the master of disguise, unless it's a slightly chunky older woman, and then the Baroness has it on lock.
No, it kind of lessens Zartan's ability because this is like 2 big episodes or miniseries in a row, and it's not the only time. Baroness is always doing this.
Yeah. And then later, Zorana does it too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's nobody at the prison who's checking in to see why she's bringing in a big basket.
I know.
No.
It's so
No.
weird. I like how Zartan ripped off that vent like it was tinfoil too.
There's the whale.
I'm gonna have to get another whale at some point.
They're amazing. Just too fragile on the
Yeah.
I think
backside.
I might be getting a whale here pretty soon from just one of the other professors here at school. I'm like, yes, I want one.
Nice.
Wow, nice.
Her rifle looks little there, huh?
Yeah.
So we forgot to mention that when Zartan's costume does its mood thing, that's a Star Wars sound.
Mm.
It's a lightsaber.
Is it? Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Around like boom, boom. Yeah.
That chameleon is the most disappointing vehicle ever.
Oh, it's no good.
So fragile.
I don't really know how they could have made it float. I mean, other than just put some kind of foam thing on the bottom of it.
Yeah. There is a box in the bottom of the whale, and I think that's just to help the whale float. Like, just it holds air in it. I don't know.
Yeah,
how
I never had trouble with the whale floating.
I don't know how you'd get that chameleon to float. You'd have to put bigger skids on it and make them hollow. And
I think maybe if you took like some of the like Nerf darts and maybe
Oh,
put
yeah.
them on the bottom of the skids, that might work. Look at us solving problems for 30-year-old toys.
does this thing float?
Welcome back to the Amateur Engineering Hour.
Yeah.
I will say I'm terribly excited at the idea of a Zartan in this new 6-inch style.
Yeah.
But I don't need the junk bin. I don't need the chameleon. What I need from the Master of Disguise is maybe some alternate heads so that his disguise isn't just a mask on his costume. Oh, hey, where's that guy that looked like Zartan? Oh no, he's here with this guy who's dressed like Zartan but has a different face. Got it. Master of Disguise, ladies and gentlemen.
He went to the Duke School of Disguise.
I remember that part right there where you use the VTOL jets to jump that giant
Yeah,
tree
that was
root.
pretty cool.
Yes.
Like anytime they can show the play features of the vehicles within these settings is awesome.
That's true. I mean, it's obviously it's a big marketing thing, but they do it in such a fun way. I mean, it just gives us ideas on how to play with the toys. And
Exactly.
It's got to be fun to come up with plot-wise.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a challenge, but I think it's, they got to be having fun thinking of how, like Larry said, they'd send them the toys and they're like, well, how would I play with this? What does this do? Let's build that into the story. Like, I think that's cool.
So this was the Dreadnought vehicle that came after the Chameleon, and it's got those skids that are like, hollowed out. I don't even know if this floats. Do you guys know if this floats? I would think this is hollow, so I would assume that this would float.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
No?
It's a swamp fire? No.
Swamp fire. I think you're right.
Called?
Yeah, so you can pull these little blades out, and then you can fold them back, or you can pop them off entirely, which you're not supposed to do. This is live television, kids.
I always wanted a series of motorcycles for the Dreadnoughts. Like, I wish that's something
too.
Yeah, boy, I got you. I got you.
I love motorcycles, just toy motorcycles as a kid. The wrecker, not the wreckers, the jump.
There you go.
So these are 1/18th scale. I think they're made by Maisto. You can buy them at the Harley Davidson store. I've got a dozen of these. I put all of my Dreadnoughts on these. It's awesome. Yeah. And then this is the badass modern Dreadnought tricycle. This is way better than the purple and color that we got back in the day. This is a respectable Dreadnought. These are shotguns, and you can just put those down like that.
Oh, wow.
Let's press this little button.
Oh, that's fun.
And they pop up. And then in the back right here, you got these little intimidating spikes. But then if you hit that, they pop open.
Oh, man, that's cool.
So this is a pretty.
So what's that called?
I don't. Yeah, I think it's called the Doom Cycle.
Okay.
Yeah. I got all those small 1/18 scale motorcycles when I worked on Dreadnoughts Declassified, which came after the Snake Eyes Declassified book. So that's actually when I learned how to even draw a motorcycle. It was always super intimidating. I'm like, I never rode motorcycles. I'm not a mechanic or anything like that. So I didn't know what all those parts were. So I went out and got a bunch of those little kind of motorcycles just to be able to hold and look at any angle. And so thanks to that 40-page book, I kind of learned how to do it.
I drew them all. I drew a motorcycle on one cover, and good God, that was a nightmare. Because I'm like you. I'm not like a machine guy. I don't know how to, I'm lucky I know where the oil goes, let alone to change oil. So just trying to look up motorcycle parts, because I was trying to draw it from below the motorcycle, and it wasn't till 2 months after I finished it that a friend of mine was like, oh, I know a friend who has a bike shop. He could have put something on a lift for you. And that happens all the time. You finish something, and then months later you find just the perfect photo reference you would have needed, or just the person who had the thing that you could have used every time.
Do we have a couple of comments or anything we could talk about, or should we get going on the episode again?
Dino's always got some smart stuff, though. He said one thing that was never addressed: how come G.I. Joe was not presented seriously like other anime cartoons like Space Battleship, Yamato, Robotech, or Thunderbirds 2086? It should have been more serious like Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. So I'll say I don't think that's right. G.I. Joe, the cartoon, for me was the perfect entry point for a 5 or 6 year old kid, which I was at the time. This was perfect. If I wanted serious, more mature, that's where the Larry Hama comic really carried my fandom for several more years. So I think the cartoon was intended to reach a much younger audience.
I think once you get to G.I. Joe Resolute, when they took a more mature look at the characters and G.I. Joe, it was great for guys in their late 30s, early 40s. But for a kid, it's pretty dark and pretty unrelenting. I mean, I know when I was a kid and I tried to watch Star Blazers, I was bored to tears. I really needed the action of Battle of the Planets or Speed Racer or G.I. Joe, something that was clipping along. And even with G.I. Joe, if they got a little too story heavy, I didn't always pay complete attention. I was waiting for the stuff to get blown up real good.
Yeah. Things that we expect out of the property isn't always what the brand owners, what Hasbro wanted out of the property. And ultimately they dictate that. And they've always said, from the very beginning, this is like a military fantasy. I mean, those are definitively the words that they would use for us as content creators. Like, remember, this is military fantasy, so it was never meant to be just a straight-on one-to-one representation of the military. But it definitely takes those military components, and so it's something in between.
And I think we all, at some point, we kind of aged out of the brand, and the brand just continued to refresh and stayed where it was with, as long as it could, with a certain age group of fans. Mm-hmm. And it's not a criticism of the brand, but it just was never designed to grow with us.
Right.
No, it absolutely was not. By the way, just out of curiosity, side note, and then let's get back into it. Where did you tag out of being a G.I. Joe collector? I left right after the Defiant era, where we were starting to go into space and things like that. And then I discovered the girls and realized that girls and G.I. Joe were probably not going to be compatible items. So that's when I made the switch. But yeah, it was about the time G.I. Joe was heading into space, which I didn't have a problem with. It just, that's the mark of time for me.
I think I was into G.I. Joe, and instead of discovering girls, I discovered Ninja Turtles.
Ouch. And that took you off of G.I. Joe entirely?
Not entirely. Like I've mentioned before, I think last week, just a lot of my friends had a lot of the Joe figures, and we, like, one of our buddies down the road collected Joe, somebody else collected Star Wars, and me and my family, we had Joes, but it was more like Ninja Turtle, He-Man, and then Ninja Turtles. It was kind of what we had at our house. Yep. And then over time, like, as my buddy was getting rid of his Joes, I would get them from him. Or again, ones would get passed down to me from my older brothers. Yeah, so I kind of had a hodgepodge group. I was never like 100% into Joe figures. I was like on the cartoon, like Die Hard. I watched the cartoon until it stopped. But yeah. So it was more, I just kind of moved on to another toy line more than and I think it was probably right about the same time. I guess like the 87, 88, somewhere in there. I was getting less Joe figures and more like Ninja stuff.
The last Joe figures I remember buying were the Battle Force 2000. And I remember having the experience of like getting them and playing with them, being like, this just doesn't feel right anymore. This just doesn't feel like G.I. Joe anymore. This feels like Star Wars. And I don't think it was. We also moved around the same time, and I was moving away from my two best friends, and like our whole world revolved around G.I. Joe and dressing up in military and going out and having BB gun battles and stuff like that. And so where I moved to, there weren't any other kids around, and so it was just me. So I stuck with the G.I. Joes that I had, and then actually, weirdly, Late Night with David Letterman and Steve Martin Records, and I remember my mom got a cassette series of Saturday Night Live. It was like the original episodes, but it was like a 5-box set of SNL, and so I went into like comedy world. Yeah, and that's kind of what took, and drawing, because I would stay up at night drawing, waiting for Letterman to come on, and then trying to watch Letterman without getting caught by my mom.
Yep. I was 1990. I bought everything up through 1989, and then 1990, for whatever reason, I only bought some figures, and they had great accessories, and they were still really good figures. Bullhorn, Ambush. There's some amazing figures in 1990. I don't remember buying any 1990 vehicles, and then I was just out. I was just done. And I think it was because Larry Hama's comic had turned me on to comics, and I just made that jump from playing with toys to now I'm just reading comic books and drawing. But then, interestingly enough, and I won't belabor this for too long, Exo Squad, the cartoon, came out 3 years later, and I was back in toy aisles because that cartoon was so good. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Exo Squad. It's mature. It's linear. Each episode builds. It's a serial storyline. Each episode builds on the previous, and the key theme is about slavery. They create these Neo-Sapiens that work for them, and then the Neo-Sapiens overthrow them. And you want to pull for the Neo-Sapiens because they used to be slaves, but now they're enslaving the humans, and that's kind of wrong. You can't like pull against the humans. It's interesting, man. So check out Exo Squad when you get a chance. So anyway,
I can tell you what pulled me back into toys. For you as Exo Squad, for me it was the Batman animated series figures.
Oh, I loved it.
That Batmobile and that
So
first
good.
line of Batman and villains. Yeah, I was hooked.
That intro.
For me, it was the X-Men cartoon and like the Toy Biz, X-Men figures and stuff.
Those figures just
me too,
weren't
exactly
good,
that.
though.
No, they weren't good.
The articulation was garbage.
But they existed.
They did.
They were there, so I grabbed them.
Yeah.
I love the cartoon. I bought some of the figures, but you can tell what you love by what will you not sell at the yard sale. And I remember I had a big yard sale, and I sold all my Toy Biz X-Men. I sold my Ninja Turtles. I sold what few Transformers I had. Like I sold all that junk, and I kept the Exo Squad, and I kept the G.I. Joes. So lifelong passions.
Can I tell you my one big yard sale cardinal sin? I was really, really into G.I. Joe, and we hit the yard sale point where you are forced to make some choices. And because they were not like the other figures, oh God, the figures I chose to get rid of were my non-swivel arm battle grip Joes. So.
How much did you give for them? Like a quarter a piece or something?
Not enough, Robert. Not enough.
That set's like $350 at least now.
Yeah. I guarantee you they sold for a quarter or 50 cents. Yeah, those
is that really what
are the Crystal Warrior figures. They all win. Oh God, dark days.
And now back to G.I. Joe.
Yeah, let's go back.
This glass is full of my tears. I don't know why they're light brown, but I'll see a doctor about that.
Drink up, Brandon.
Yeah.
This playing with the snake face always weirded me out. No, it weirded me out.
No,
really? It was too strange.
You didn't want to own one?
No.
I think somebody made a custom.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I've seen one.
What did it hit just then?
I think he's seeding the clouds.
Man, I just love Flint's voice.
Yeah, it's so good. Bill Ratner, right?
Did you got
Oh, by the way, this MacGuffin was replicated not by a robotic set for me. I just used the gun from the Death Star.
Nice.
Oh, that'll work.
Did you guys?
You mean this Death Star?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
What do we got here?
That might be the one you...
Now you only need
box it up and send it.
6 more of them to make a full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Somebody did that. I saw a photo of it online. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah. Did that actually come through my Death Star?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Okay.
Now it's pretty small.
Yes,
you might want to show it when we go back to full screen.
We saw it in the gallery view, but I don't know that the gallery view always shows up in the recording. But.
Yeah, I don't think the Facebook people saw it. You could show it to them again.
Yeah.
So here we have the different designs for the Cobra.
Their walk cycles were totally screwy there.
Yeah, they're a bit weird.
Yeah.
Wait, so look, Snake Eyes no longer has the pink accents that he had in the last miniseries. With version 2, they didn't feel the need to colorize him as much.
No, yeah, he's got the the visor and he's still blue.
Well, he's
super blue.
He's
like blue and silver, but
actually, if you look at him in that small shot, it's a darker blue than it was the previous shot.
Yeah, it kind of changes. That whole scene, everybody's heads were a little big. You notice that, Tom?
Yeah.
Like proportionally.
Yeah, the drawing isn't nearly as good on this one as it was the previous one.
Oh wow,
it really isn't.
No.
It's not as consistent. I think that there are some scenes that are, but you can tell it's kind of hopping around different studios, I think.
Now, do you think that's because of what Larry was talking about with the 3 directors? Has it been better or worse from, chunk to chunk?
I think that it depends on the scene, and we might be getting some B squad or C squad stuff here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But it's also, I just don't know how much humans the studio was drawing before this. They were doing a lot of like Care Bears and Muppet Babies and stuff like that. When you have them to start drawing people, it's a different skill set. And it's something some animation companies struggle with.
Well, and not that all the G.I. Joes are super like muscle bound dudes, like a He-Man over the top, but even in this episode, everybody's kind of looking a bit puny in comparison to maybe the way they were drawn. Ooh, that was crazy.
Well, they're also a little squishy looking.
Yeah. Or even like I was saying,
You know,
Storm
they
Shadow
just don't
before
look
was
solid.
looking. Yeah, no, I agree.
Trying. We can't
I don't think I'd ever noticed that before when he pulled the battle helmet off and he had like that Darth Vader kind of under
Yeah, the
Yeah.
silver.
section. That was cool. Oh, there's Cover Girl with the short hair, short brown hair.
Hey, by the way, there are 3 female characters in that shot, and I think that's worth noting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they
I
were
think
the
that's
only 3.
so good.
Yeah, all you
Yeah.
need is a garbage detector.
You're-
Some pity laughs.
We are
from his friends.
laughing. We are laughing.
And Gung Ho's tattoo must be a nightmare to draw as an animator.
Oh, I can't even imagine. That's like his chest jiggles as he laughs, but the tattoo stays there.
Right.
It kind of looks like a prison tattoo, like they drew it on with a ballpoint pen or something, though.
He's not fooling around.
Well, we're definitely not supposed to draw it anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the books. Yeah.
I did not know that.
What do you think was the impetus for that decision?
I'm not sure. I think he's just supposed to have a shirt on, and we
Huh.
just don't see it.
Well, so supposedly, you know, Ron Rudat told me that the original Eagle Globe anchor marine symbol, he changed it enough that it wouldn't be a straight trademark ripoff of that. I don't know who's offended about what these days.
They forgot to color in her shoulder thing. That
Oh, I didn't see
Scarlet
that.
shot.
I always whenever we talked about these episodes on the podcast Star Joe's with Ryan, we always thought it was crazy that like everybody's trained on flying a Sky Striker, and if everybody can fly a Sky Striker, what's Ace doing?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, okay, let's give it to him. Everybody else crashes a Sky Striker. Well, that's true. Everybody who flies a Sky Striker crashes one. But then we started counting up the number of Sky Strikers that Ace crashes, and he out-crashes everybody on the show.
Yeah.
Like, hands down.
Is he the trainer?
I don't know. Maybe. Everybody learned from him. I even went so far as to look up the price of an F-14 Tomcat, and then we counted how many Sky Strikers went down over the course of the series, and like added it all up. We're like, oh my gosh, Ace, somebody needs to be held accountable.
He's like the John McCain of Joe pilots.
Well, I mean, if you look at how CoverGirl was just driving a Wolverine into his tanks rather than using the missiles.
It's true.
Like,
Complete disregard for budget.
Yeah.
Cobra Super Chia Pets in action here.
It's just representative of the Reagan years defense budgets. You know, just piling up money. Yeah, hear those lightsaber sounds?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah.
So have you guys noticed that Destro's little chest piece has like an X of cables coming out from it? It doesn't really match the kind of like necklace design.
I think that's supposed to be the bottom line of his pecs.
Is that chest muscles, you think?
Yeah, that's
It just kind of misplaced.
a pec line.
They might have.
Yeah.
Well, we were looking up at him, so that might be part of it, or the animators kind of confused what that was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's probably a problem with the animators not understanding the design.
So are they telling you as well to cover up Destro's chest, or is this just Gung Ho's chest that needs to be covered?
No, for Destro, they said make the V deeper. I was confused.
Oh
by
wow. Okay.
that. I was like,
Maybe
I'm
it's
getting
just
mixed messages here.
Only the bad guys show their chest.
Destro loves a deep V.
I think this
really
is just
does.
the closing here, the teaser for next episode.
Did Flint come with that flashlight? I'm trying to remember.
No.
As it told,
No.
he didn't come with that.
He
Okay.
had a shotgun in the backpack.
Yeah, pretty simple accessories on him.
Oh, we get another arena of sports.
Arena
Did
of
somebody
sport.
Did somebody come with that flashlight though?
Outback has a flashlight, and Tunnel Rat has 2 flashlights on his backpack.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
I'm sure there's more than that.
on the
I'm just-
side. Or, yeah.
I just remember there being one. I couldn't remember who it was.
Outback had the green one that attached to his leg. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I think he was that was the same year as Tunnel Rat. Both were 87, so that was the flashlight year, I guess.
I like how to fire the Weather Dominator. He's like, scoosh, scoosh, and like comes back on him.
I wish the Polar Battle Bear was a 2-seater. Like seeing the 2-seater Polar Battle Bears on the cartoon always made me want more.
Yeah, totally.
Well, you know, I think I don't know if you guys have seen it, but somebody made a Bruce Timm designed. I don't know if you saw it, but somebody recently made a Viper from Battlestar Galactica in scale with the X-Wing fighter and the Buck Rogers Starfighter.
That's cool.
So it seems to me that in the world of 3D printing, someone could start making these things.
Oh my gosh.
You know, the two-seater. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
You know, someone could easily make a two-seater polar battle bear or a larger HISS tank, that kind of stuff. It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
It's still hard for me to get past the lines of the 3D printing so far. Like once it gets to that point where the microns are so small that you don't see those horizontal printing lines,
right? Yeah.
I'll be all over it.
We have an extrusion printer. It's I forget what it's called. It's Elegoo is the name of our printer, so it doesn't have those kind of lines.
Mm. Oh wow!
Yeah, I've seen some stuff that the students at SCAD do. They'll sculpt something in ZBrush and put it through a printer, and it's pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they have to work it a little bit, but I've been impressed with the detail that's coming out of those.
If you're just joining us, welcome back to Printer Pals.
No, we're talking about how to hack, like make your own toys. You know, like everybody wishing they had that toy that showed up on the cartoon, and you know, like it's not out of the realm of possibility to commission somebody who has the capabilities.
Yeah. I've seen guys who have printed 16-inch tall Star Wars figures. You know, there's fewer things to move around and bend because you really only have, the 5 movable points. But it seems to me it's actually, I just saw somebody, they took the Wilma Deering Buck Rogers figure, which is very similar to the G.I. Joe design. And, and I hate to say, it's one of those things where you have all this power and you're going to waste it on something like this. So what this person did was they built a model of the front of the Wilma Deering body, and all they did was make her boobs bigger. And then if you feel the need to customize your 40-year-old Buck Rogers Wilma Deering figure, my God, your prayers have been answered. And if you've been upset by her not being a triple D all these years, finally, God bless you, you have a solution. So
power's in your hands.
People are already doing this stuff.
Do we have anything from the comments, Facebook comments?
Do you think there will ever be a G.I. Joe animated series reboot?
Yes.
I'll answer that really quick. I think some of the designs of the 6-inch figures that have the kind of future tech sci-fi laser blaster look and feel to them, and some of the design decisions that have been made for the character updates, I'm hoping that's going to tie into a cartoon. I'm not saying that they're working on anything, but it would be nice if they were, and that would justify some of those design decisions. What do you guys think?
Not that I have any kind of insider information, but just in general, I think that they were surprised at the reaction to G.I. Joe Resolute, that it had such an outcry. Everybody was interested. It boosted their ratings like crazy on the Pulse, or not the Pulse, what was it called? The Hub?
Adult Swim, wasn't it? Wait, you're talking about Renegades. Are you talking about Renegades?
No. Like when Resolute was coming out in these little 5-minute segments between other shows.
That was on Adult Swim though, right? Because it was for the more mature audience.
Yeah, and it had but like ratings just went crazy because everybody was
it was only
online.
I didn't realize it actually aired on television.
It aired first.
I didn't know that either.
And then they were put up on like YouTube as clips, But I think it was just a big deal. And then, I don't know if it was then they decided to put it in production, but a lot of the designers, the creators for Resolute weren't contracted to do anything long-term ever, So they then decided to do a long-term show, which was Renegades, which of course had different writers, different character designers, different animation studios, all of that across the board, and didn't quite hit the same tone because they had to go back and try to accommodate the younger audience with the new interest, and it didn't quite, wasn't quite the same. So it was kind of like magic in a bottle there for a bit with the Resolute. If they could do that again and just have an option for a younger audience while simultaneously doing something kind of for that older audience, that would be amazing. I don't know that that's going to happen.
As much as I would like to go back to a kind of more simple time and innocent days, I don't know that the world as it is now could sustain a military show. It's just become too politicized.
Yeah, it's just a
I don't know.
different time in the 80s. Whole different atmosphere,
it's-
outlook,
I just don't
worldview,
know
all
if
that.
you can do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Even a movie. I mean, I don't know, unless you made it a period piece that took place in the 80s. I don't know.
That could be cool though. I'd watch that.
So my friend Benjamin Thomas just chimed in and said that Resolute aired as 5-minute YouTube video clips and was finally aired as a full movie on the Cartoon Network at midnight on Saturday at some point later. I remember it being on Adult Swim, so that would be Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and that would be midnight on a Saturday. So that makes a lot of sense. I remembered it being on Adult Swim. I will say
I can see.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say to the point about doing something set in the 80s, you know, or that kind of thing. I can almost see a universe in which one likely candidate that we might get down the road is some weird, like, Will Ferrell movie version of the G.I. Joe cartoon. You know what I mean? like a weird parody of it.
Didn't we already get that though?
Comedy.
Community did an amazing job parodying G.I. Joe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The actual G.I. Joe movie.
Sad face.
It was sad, yeah.
You're not wrong.
I have to say, I really don't know how they missed the boat, because it seemed to me that, like, if you're going to make a G.I. Joe movie, it needs to be like 50% the A-Team and 50% Black Hawk Down. You know, like that's it should somewhere in between those two worlds.
Well, the thing is, they could have made that movie decades ago. I always kind of felt like you can just hint at a bit of sci-fi, but for the most part, it's like a military movie that could have been made in the 90s. Like, it's ridiculous it took so long to get a movie out. And when they did, they went kind of too over the top with that. And again, kind of missed the mark for, like, tonally what was necessary. Like, it didn't have to have gigantic mid-2000s, late 2000s special effects.
Yeah.
You know.
I thought the first movie was more like the cartoon, kind of over the top, like you said, and then Retaliation was more like a special missions, a smaller team where you actually got to know them. So I enjoyed Retaliation a lot more. I still didn't love it, but it was passable, and I've watched it multiple times. Right?
I think with Retaliation, they did an amazing job with the budget that they had.
Yeah.
I think maybe, you know, if they were going to do something like that. You know, maybe it needs to live on television somewhere. I don't know, you know, a smaller, like, I think the concept of Renegades in terms of it's a much smaller group, I think that's maybe a way to go. And you don't have access to 1,000 Sky Strikers and, you know, 24 Mobats and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's just a much smaller team with a much tighter budget and parameters, but you know, it's possible, and you know, I would love to see that.
I remember being at JoeCon maybe 4 or 5 years ago when Mark Weber was brand manager, and talking with him about the Gage and Costa Cobra series and how amazing of a Netflix series that would be, because you could do it with a relatively low budget. You're focused on a couple, you know, key roles, you know, Tomac, Zaymot, Chuckles, Jinx, you know, you cast maybe 8 people, and you can tell this massive story that ends with, like, the destruction of Cobra Island. Like, it's got this huge ending, and it's just really, like, focused along the way, and it could absolutely be broken into, like, a serial kind of chapter-based 12 episodes on Netflix kind of thing. And I think you're right. Like, you're going to have to focus on these smaller stories and these smaller casts to do anything live action that's going to be like worth its salt. And I think maybe that's what we'll get with Snake Eyes. Like, Scarlet's going to be in it, Baroness is going to be in it, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, but not a much larger cast than that.
Yeah, you know,
it's just ninjas.
Last year Netflix did a movie that had a pretty great lineup. It was like Ben Affleck and like 5 or 6 other known, you know, but good actors.
Yeah,
and it was I think they were vets who were taking down a drug lord's, you know, money.
It was like a cash grab. It was like Charlie Hunnam and a few other guys. Yeah,
exactly. And I saw that and I thought, you know, that could have easily been a G.I. Joe adventure. And I just saw a commercial for Chris Hemsworth Netflix film where he's going in and rescuing a kid. That could have been a G.I. Joe adventure. So I think there's a way to tell these solo stories that could have, kind of like the Avengers, where you've got, instead of Chris Hemsworth playing just a dude, maybe it's rock and roll, and he's got to call his guy Breaker in because he's got a communications issue he's got to deal with. And, maybe you build up to an Avengers type thing.
Well, so one thing I'm curious about is, I think that's smart and most likely the best way to go about it. But
that's me, Mr. Smart.
It's kind of like the last Rambo movie. If you watched it, it felt like that could have been any movie. Just an old guy goes and gets revenge. It wasn't. It feels like, hey, we have this script sitting around. What if we change the name of the lead guy to John Rambo? Then it becomes a Rambo movie.
That's why I've hesitated to watch that one. I don't want to tarnish my love of Rambo.
I know. I'm just curious about so that Ben Affleck movie that was called Triple Frontier, and I remember thinking the same thing, kind of. But I'm just kind of like, well, if we just name him Roadblock, then is this G.I. Joe? Is it just kind of like this could be any kind of espionage movie, and we just put Cobra on the title?
I think.
Are you going to get the same
what I'm saying is,
satisfaction out of
I look at the production of it, and it was a well-produced piece of film. It wasn't a great story. It wasn't anything that I felt like I haven't seen before. But the fact that they put money into it that made it look good, and they put enough money into it to attract talent, I'm sure that if there's money to do that, and it's not, that's money that they made it, it's done, and if you watch it, you might watch it a second time, maybe. So I look at that and I think, there's money to make those kind of things. Why not put that money into things that could build into something, right? And so worst case scenario, you do a G.I. Joe adventure once a year, and if they work out, great, then eventually you can build towards a team film. But if you start them out as G.I. Joe Special, or Netflix presents G.I. Joe Special Mission Force, and it's, maybe one or two Joes, you get a cameo of this guy and that guy.
I would love it.
It just seems to me like there's money out there. People still love the brand. It just seems like it's doable.
You do it anthology style, like Black Mirror, have a different director for each episode, cast a couple different people, let people play in this universe that a lot of people grow up with. There's decades of love and brand equity here. Let different people play in this universe. It doesn't have to be all tied together. I really like that idea too, Tom.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a matter of planning it.
Yeah. That'd be incredible.
In the meantime, we'll always have Megaforce. So look it up. Look it up, kids. Look it up. I guess we're done for the evening, right?
Yeah, I gotta go help put the baby down. So.
Oh, sorry.
Good to see you guys again, man. We'll be back here 8:30 next Wednesday with a special guest who we are not spoiling yet. So.
Yep.
Is it me?
No.
Okay. Tom, I think you're special.
No, it is
Tom.
not.
You're special every week, Tom.
You're a special host.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks for all the comments. We appreciate the engagement, and we'll try to edit this and throw it up on YouTube tomorrow, and we'll see you for episode 2. I did want to try each time we do this to give a shout out to the director and writer of these episodes. So this was still Ron Friedman, who wrote the entire last miniseries. He wrote this entire miniseries. So the first 10 episodes, thank you, Ron Friedman, and directed by Dan Thompson, same director for the first miniseries that we got in this miniseries. So shout out to both of you guys for enriching our childhoods. We'll see all of you in a week.
See you, everybody.
Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
He bounced.
Of course he did.
He was ready, man.
I saw him yawning a couple times at the end. I was like, we're going to get the Brandon Bolt here in just a second. Watch it.
He was like half out of his chair when that went black.
He never gives up. He'll stay till the right one. G.I.